Welcome everyone to RosieCon Book Festival for 2021. I am so excited that you could all join me this evening. My name is Diane Rogers. I am the school librarian at Ben Davis Ninth Grade Center in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm also the founding member and steering committee chair of the RosieCon Book Festival. I am so honored and so very excited to begin this festival with you tonight. And this is the first in a series of virtual events, all based on the books and the authors from the Elliott Rosewater, Indiana High School book list. This is a recommended reading list of contemporary titles for teens within the state of Indiana. The Rosewater list is renewed every year with new and exciting books and is sponsored by the Indiana Library Federation. Readers then vote every year for their favorite book from the list, and the winning title is given the Rosewater Award. One of our panelists tonight was the winner of this award just 2 years ago. Voting is online and is currently open. So log on to the Indiana Library Federation website, go to Programs, Book Awards, and vote for your favorite novel. Voting is currently open and will end at the end of April. Before I officially begin events this evening, I do want to remind participants that I will announce the winner of the Emmy Laybourne Author Visit giveaway at the end of our hour together. Stay tuned for that exciting announcement later. Let me take a moment to also thank our sponsors this evening for the RosieCon Book Festival. Grant money has been donated by Eli Lilly and Company and the Lilly Endowment for the Arts, the Indianapolis Foundation Library Fund, and Wayne Township Schools to support RosieCon Book Festival. Thank you all to our corporate donation sponsors, and thank you for your support. Our panel tonight is Murder and Mayhem. It is perfect for those of you who love spine-tingling thrillers and murder mystery novels. Let me now introduce our moderator. Hoosier Sarah Smith is the author of the YA book It's a Wonderful Death, published by Sky Pony Press, and the upcoming novel due out in October, Where There's a Whisk, published by Running Press. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Sarah,
Diane,
take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited about this panel. I've already fangirl at least once, and I'm sure I'll fangirl again tonight. So those of you who are watching on YouTube Live, we're super happy to have you. Go ahead and type in any questions that you have in the chat, and we'll try to answer them if we can. Those of you on Zoom, welcome, and hopefully we won't have any Zoom technicality issues. I'm going to start off with introducing all of our panelists. So, Emmy Laybourne, if you'd like to take it away, we'd love to hear about you and your book.
Hi, everybody. It is such a joy to be here. RosieCon is, I want to say it's my favorite book festival. And I had the great honor to win the Elliott Rosewater Award a couple years back for my book, Sweet. And I'm just overjoyed to be here with you. I've written 6 books, the Monument 14 series. This is my own copy, which is all flagged up with notes that I've made for myself over the years. And my last 2 books are The Berserker and Ransacker, a series set in 1886. They're historical fantasies about a group of Norwegian immigrants with ancient Viking superpowers. And I'm delighted to be here. We have such a great panel. I can't wait for you to meet the next author. To welcome to this Zoom panel is, who should it be?
Kendare. Welcome.
Kendare. Oh my God. Kendare, come on, show yourself.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm Kendare Blake. Emmy just showed me up because I realized I don't have any copies of my books to flash. And I looked around and like there's not a single one near enough for me to go grab. But I am the author of the Three Dark Crowns series, the Anna Dressed in Blood series, and my next book coming up in September is called All These Bodies, which is also about murder. Three Dark Crowns also featured murder, and Anna Dressed in Blood featured murder. So I imagine that's why they asked me to be on this panel.
You do have, it looks like, some copies, some posters in.
Oh, I do. Yeah, here. Okay.
So look,
There
we go. Anna Dressed
All right. Hey.
There we go. All right. So next up is Barry Laga.
Here comes Barry.
Hello, everybody. It is great to be here virtually and to be here at all. And I'm really thrilled to do this. This is my first event of 2021, and I'm happy to be here with people who are just as disturbed as I am, just as dark, just as messed up. I have written, at this point, I think it's 25 books in the last 15 years. So I'm not going to run through all of them because we'd be here all day. But probably the one that got me on this panel is the I Hunt Killers trilogy, the story of Jasper Dent, whose father Billy is the world's most notorious serial killer, and Jazz is growing up with that in his nature and his nurture, and is terrified he's going to grow up to be just like his dad if he doesn't watch it. Also helping in terms of murder and mayhem, Thanos, Titan Consumed. This is the official Marvel Cinematic Universe origin of Thanos. He's killed a lot of people. I mean, billions and billions of people. So I think in sheer numbers alone, this is the highest body count and the most blood of anything I've ever done. So there's two of them, and I look forward to hopefully disturbing people with answers to questions.
Every time I'm on a panel, my TBR list grows by like 500 books. There's one more. All right, Natalie Richards, you are next.
Hello, I have not killed a billion people in my book, Barry, so I don't know how to match that. I am Natalie Richards. I have written 7 books. I do like to write books that keep you from sleeping. That's my plan, is I don't want anybody reading my books to ever sleep again. So the one you're probably familiar with now is One Was Lost. This is my 4th book. I like to trap kids in the woods and leave them there with somebody chasing them. That's kind of my plan in life. And 5 Total Strangers is my most recent book, which is getting a ton of attention right now, which is really nice. That's been amazing to have so many readers reaching out when I'm very lonely from COVID. So I love that. This book is about a snowstorm and the worst imaginable road trip you could be on. Yes, I would say that. So both of these books are not quite a billion body count, but there's definitely some death, some mayhem, lots of chaos, and lots of what is going on. I would say that's what I've got to offer you.
Okay, I am more and more feeling like I'm the wrong person to be handling this panel tonight because I write cute books. All right, so Kim Savage, last but definitely not least, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Last but not least, I am coming to you from freezing cold Boston right now or outside of Boston. I'm just thrilled to be here. I've been scribbling all kinds of notes because I'm going to pre-order all of these books that are coming out this year and next. I'm so excited. I've got 3 novels, starting with After the Woods, Beautiful Broken Girls. And yes, I did run and get these books when Emmy started showing her, so I ran and got this too. In Her Skin, this is the latest. To be accurate, murder, mayhem, and both. So I to be here. My books all sort of deal with the aftermath of murder and mostly the mayhem that comes. The latest one, In Her Skin, is about a 16-year-old con artist who's on the run, who impersonates a girl who went missing 7 years before from a Boston brownstone. And the mom and dad and their daughter Temple seem to welcome her with open arms. And life seems to be perfect with this family, the Lovecrafts, but Joe starts to suspect that this perfect family has secrets of their own. It's inspired by the story of a real-life con artist, Frederick Bourdon, who impersonated a missing boy from Texas. Lately it's feeling more relevant than ever because it's about people who choose to believe truths in the face of evidence to the contrary. So take from that what you will. I'm excited to be here. Let's go.
I didn't realize that whole believing things that aren't real was a thing now. That's weird. Okay.
Right.
So I'm going to start off with a couple questions, and then as we get questions coming in, I'll throw those out to you too. Now, I'm going to assume that no one on this panel is a serial killer or even like your garden variety murderer or mayhem creator maybe, but I'm just assuming. And if you are, everyone who's watching, it's okay. This is virtual. We don't know where you live. You are safe, or you laptop, you'll be fine. So with this assumption, how do you guys get in the heads of someone capable of taking life or causing like torture or whatever, to create characters that readers end up really rooting for, or rooting for them to get taken down? We are going to start with Barry.
Friends of mine joked when I was working on the Killers books that I must have been born without a soul, because it was far, far too easy for me to imagine this and to put myself in those shoes. I think honestly, if we were all being honest, I think we've all had those moments in our lives where we're like, I could kill that person. And we're not speaking facetiously. Like, we really genuinely wish we could cause that person to just disappear. And it is only society and the law that keeps us from doing it. And you sort of you tap into that. And I think also, I'm curious to hear what everybody else says. I find that when you write these characters, you have to write them without judgment, because if you're trying to get into the head of a killer or any sort of a criminal or anything like that, if you approach it with judgment, it's not going to come across, because somebody who kills people, and who does these things, they clearly are okay with it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. And they're doing it in contravention of all the norms of society. They know they're not supposed to be, but they think it's okay in that moment. And so you have to approach it from that perspective. You have to convince yourself it's okay to do this, so that you can present the character from a place of truth. And that will hopefully resonate with the reader and make them despise this character, but also have a sort of understanding of them, and maybe even a weird kind of respect.
It's funny because in all of my books, I realized that people are driven to kill by forces outside of their control. So in Monument 14, there's a chemical weapons that causes one type of blood type, people with O blood type, to become filled with a murderous rage. In my book Sweet, it's a diet sweetener that makes people turn into homicidal maniacs. And in my book Berserker, she has this superpower that when someone she loves is in danger, she flies into a killing rage. So I basically spent my whole career as a novelist creating ways for people to kill people, but it's not their fault, which I don't feel like I'm filled with a murderous rage that I need to keep writing about it, but somehow I must be. But for me, what is really important is that when a life is taken, is that the reader and that the character who's done this really feel it and have a realistic response. So I think that's an important thing to portray. Is there guilt? Is there sadness? Is there a terrible load? I think there should be. So that's something that I'm always aware to build in, even as I manage to let all my murderous characters sort of have a good reason why they did it.
Kendare, do you have something?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with Barry on this one. I think if I told you the full truth, everybody would like throw me out in violation of policy. But I mean, I've always been kind of immersed in killers and serial killers. I've always like been creepily fascinated with horror movies and true crime, and Freddy Krueger was my favorite when I was a kid, and he still kind of is. My best friend growing up, she actually studied serial killers. She like went to her master's degree for forensic psych, and she did her master's profiles on Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy, and these her favorite serial killers from the time. So we've talked about that a lot. And I actually remember this moment from reading her dissertation, because I was an English major, so she asked me to proofread it. And when I got to the section on Jeffrey Dahmer, I noticed that she kept spelling meat, M-E-E-T, as M-E-A-T. As you know, Jeffrey Dahmer was a famous cannibal. So I'm reading through it and I'm like messaging her and I'm like, are you doing this on purpose? Are you trying to be funny? Because your master's dissertation is not the time to joke. And she's like, oh my God, I didn't even realize it. So I've always had that kind of sick, morbid sense of humor. So easy to pop it into a book.
Great. Kim?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I don't find darkness in my books in the same place as I think that other people find it. I always have a main character who's incredibly flawed. Like in her skin, Jo is not a good person. She's a con artist who was impersonating a girl who went missing, and she's taking advantage of the lifestyle that she left. But I find the true darkness in other places in my story. Like I think it's much more dark to think about the rich girl who has to steal and lie in order to feel something, or the child soldier who has to he knows what it's like to have to depend on monsters to survive, which is much like what Jo has to do living with the Lovecraft. So I think the obvious monsters and getting inside their head is it's not quite the process that maybe the reader thinks it is. Sometimes we're thinking that I think always we're thinking that that protagonist has very good reasons to be a protagonist, and it's these outside forces that, in fact, are a little bit more dark. Also, Kendara, I want your friends. Just going to throw that out there. I want your friends.
I'm sure she'll let you know if they're taking applications. Natalie, you are next.
So I'm a little with Barry, which, by the way, this is still kind of a cool moment because I was a huge fangirl of your work, Barry, for many moons. So this is pretty exciting.
Thank
for
you.
me being on a
Thank
panel
you
with
very much. Thank you.
But I will say I've always believed very strongly your villain in your book is the hero of their own story. We've heard that before in writing seminars. That's true. But the other truth is that your hero is the villain in someone else's story. So I try to think of my characters not in one dimension where they fit into my story. I think that's convenient to do as a writer, to say you're a villain, so that's where I'm going to put you, and let's just think of you that way. But if you think of them as a person, more person, less villain, less hero, then you're forced to look at their darkness, because Barry's right and Kendara's right too. I definitely have moments where I'm like, I could throw you out a window. That could happen. And I'm a mom and I have a dog and I bake cookies, but I might kill you. So we all have that side to us somewhere. We can hide it, we can pretend we don't, but it's in there. And if you tap into it honestly, if you really look at it and stop thinking about the pawn or the role you need a character to play, and more the person that they are, you're going to find the darkness if you look hard enough. That's how I do it.
Excellent. Just a reminder to everybody who's watching, if you have a question, click on that Q&A and let us know what you want to hear from these authors. Okay, so my next question is, in adult horror, murder, thriller, suspense, there is really no limit to what can happen, right? But in YA, my question is there a limit that you won't cross? Is there a line you won't cross? And if so, why? And if not, why not? So we're gonna start with Natalie.
I would say the line I won't cross is being inauthentic. Like I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to say, well, gosh, my character is 16, so maybe she wouldn't do this. I think that's not true at all. I think the most important thing is just being honest in your work. So I guess if there is a line, that's it. But to defend the editing world around me and my agent and many people that I've worked with, I've never found a line. I've never had an editor say, oh, you have to pull that back, or hey, don't do this. I don't think, fortunately for all of us, I don't think that's really prevalent in YA, maybe the way it was before. But I find there's a lot of freedom and a lot of support when I make a gutsy choice, or I say, hey, this thing's going to happen. And they say, great, go all the way. So that's good.
Barry.
Yeah, I haven't, I mean, I'll draw a different line for each project, but it depends on what I'm trying to achieve with that project. Sometimes it's just not going to be effective in a certain book to go a certain distance, and so I won't. But that's not because I am concerned about it or I think it's too far. It's just because I think artistically it's not the right choice for the book. The only issue I've had has not been specifically with regard to sort of blood or gore or anything like that. It's been more the psychological issues. There was some spoiler alert, some incest stuff in the late I Hunt Killers books that my editor got very squeamish about, and we had long talks about this and what to do about it and how to handle it, and I think it worked out pretty well. I got what I wanted in there. Maybe not with the specificity that I originally enumerated, but it's all still in there. I think she's probably still uncomfortable with it and wishes I hadn't done it at all. But I thought it was interesting that after, hundreds and hundreds of pages of blood and gore, that it was this description of incest that was like, no, that's it, that's too far, we can't do that. I tend, again, just the lines are situational for me.
I was trying to get to that unmute button. Okay, Kim. Your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I mean, much like you folks said, I have to decide if it's integral to the story. If it is, it belongs there. I think there are other ways too to show that something has happened, and not show it in detail if it's not necessary. So in her skin, Joe's experience in Florida before she comes to Boston is that she was mistreated by her dead mother's boyfriend. And, I don't need to spell out what happened to her, because instead I can show what happened to her in what happens when she gets to Boston. She is uncomfortable when she first gets to the Lovecrafts' home and she is told to take a bath, and she immediately thinks it's going to go to a certain place. That tells the reader that something has happened to her in the past without spelling out what happened to her in the past. So I think there are always ways to communicate the important formative experiences that your character has had, and not necessarily put it in detail if it doesn't need to be there, if that makes sense.
Boy, I really agree with what everyone's saying here. I'm right with you guys. It needs to be, if you're going to cross a line, it's got to make sense for the story. You want to do it subtly. Sometimes you have to pull back. I think, to me, one of the most interesting things that's happened over the 10 years that I've been writing books is that the lines have changed. And there are so many things now that people are able to, that readers have been able to speak up about that bother them. The phrase trigger warning is, there are triggers, and I think I'm a lot more careful now when I approach something that might be triggering to someone than I was when I started writing books. My books now, and the way I write now, it's different from when I started, and that was just 10 years ago. We've changed so much. So I am really aware of those lines, and I don't want to alienate readers or to make them feel other when I'm really trying. My goal, like the secret goal of my whole career being a writer, is to connect. And it's to enthrall and to tell a good story. But those good stories are about good people. And that's what I'm trying to share. So if I inadvertently turn someone off, I take that really seriously, and I course correct in my next project.
Kendare.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that you mentioned, Emmy, because I do agree that the lines are changing, and they will continue to change with the times. Before, I think I've written 10 books now, 10, maybe 11, I don't know. I only came into contact with pushback one time, and it was never about violence. And I have plenty of violence in my books. I like the gore, I like to describe the entrails. But the only pushback I'd ever received was from my UK publisher, and it was, hey, could you move the F word onto the second page? Because we don't want it staring people right in the front if they just open it and read. I'm like, okay, no problem. I'll just pop it onto the second page. And that was fine. But in my next book, my editor and I just had a conversation because one of the characters in the book, he is the son of a local sheriff, and the book is set in 1958. And there's a scene where there may be an intruder into their home. And I described the sheriff as keeping his service pistol in an unlocked closet. And my editor was very uncomfortable with that. She's like, I think that's kind of irresponsible for the times to even mention it like that. I'm like, I get you, but it was in 1958, and these are rural kids, and they're probably still sleeping with guns under their pillows to this day. But we talked about it a lot, and like, I can reframe this, I can do something else, because there are just different things that we need to be cognizant of as times change and our readership is a teenage readership, a growing readership, stuff like that.
I'll tell you, editors will not let you kill a dog. That I found out. You cannot kill a dog in a book. I tried to kill dogs in 2 books and I got a real talking to about it. So.
Oh, I killed a dog.
You did? Barry.
Oh, I killed the hell out of it.
All right, so we've actually gotten a couple of questions about this. I'm going to go ahead and jump back and forth between Q&A. Talking about lines you won't cross, one of the questions that we've gotten from two people watching is, will you kill children in your book? And if so, and this is a continue, do you show their death or do you simply say that they die? Let's go with Emmy.
Aha. Spoiler alert, there's a teenager who dies in one of my books. There's got to be more. I'm just thinking of one book, but I don't show children being killed. I can't deal with it. I put my children through a lot. In Monument 14, there are kids as young as 5 in this group of kids trying to survive in this post-apocalyptic scenario. I put them through a lot of danger. I put them through, they get hurt, but I can't do it. I'm a mom, I got 2 kids. I would not do it. I have not done it. And I don't know. I open it up to my esteemed authors. What about you guys? Barry's got a twitch on his face. I think we know the answer over there.
Go ahead, Barry, take it.
Yeah, I mean, I did. Writing the Killers books and everything, I had sort of a reputation for writing very dark stuff. And when my wife got pregnant with our first child, everybody that I knew in publishing was making fun of me and saying, "Oh, you're going to go soft now. You're going to be a dad. You're going to go soft." And I said, the first book I write after my kid is born, I'm going to do something horrible to a baby in it, just to prove to you guys that I haven't gone soft. And I was joking. Like, I'm not saying it was a good joke, but it was a joke. I wasn't serious. But the first book I wrote after my daughter was born, she was about 6 months old, was a book called Bang, which is about a 4-year-old boy who's playing with his father's gun and accidentally shoots and kills his baby sister. And it was like one of the toughest things I've ever done in my life. It was that book just destroyed me, like, psychically. But yeah, I did it. And I felt like it was a story worth telling. It was not easy. It was very difficult to write about a murdered baby while I had a baby in a bassinet next to me. And there were some things in the book I couldn't write while she was in the house. Like, I had somebody come over and watch her, and I'd go to a coffee shop for an hour to write that thing and come back. But yeah, if I feel like the story needs it, and if I feel like it's a story worth telling, maybe it's a character flaw in me, but I will go ahead and do it, whatever the price is to my brain. So yeah, not only would I do it, I did do it.
Kendare.
I know I must have killed kids. There's just a lot of, in Three Dark Crowns, there's a lot of battle scenes and slaughter of cities. So there must have been kids who lived there. But the fact that I am having a hard time picking one out probably tells me that I have never described the murder of a child in glorious detail so no, I mean, I've killed animals and that's hard for me. So no, nothing's coming to mind. There's something for me in the plus column. Have not killed babies yet.
Either that or it's something to look forward to.
I know, it's like a checklist. It's not a plus column, it's a checklist.
It's your bucket list.
Oh, your buckets are
You
scary.
have to have goals, Gary. You got to have goals.
Natalie, you're next.
So for me, I think it would be how I do it. Because Barry, something I really respect about your work is it is dark. You're going to places that a lot of people won't go, but you're doing it in a way that never feels lurid. I never feel some sort of weird, we're doing something gross here. There's a difference between telling a story that's dark and telling a story that makes me feel icky about watching the dark story. And I don't know that I could quite articulate what that difference is, but I think that when I do something that edges into territory where it's a younger teen that's dying in my book, or someone that I feel is veering into childhood, I may choose to do it if it's necessary, but I would be really careful about the way that I render that on the page. Like, it would be really important to me to not just trust myself, have another trusted reader, have some people really talk to me about it, because that is one of the things that will bother me, is if there's something, and it doesn't have to be murder, it could be other crimes with children or others, that, you know, something that Emmy was saying where it is a triggery thing, and I'm like, is this being done in a way that is respectful and good, and that I'm telling a story that needs to be told, or am I doing something gross and icky? So I think that's really important when you're dealing with a very touchy, violent matter, or, you know, anything that could cause a reader that feeling of, wait a minute, it's just how you do it.
Kim?
Yeah, I like what you said, Natalie, about sort of checking yourself, sort of having a checks and balances system to make sure you're not doing something icky. The question had me doing some quick math to try to remember exactly how old Vivian Weir, the girl who goes missing in the skin, is. Technically, she is a kid, so I killed her. Spoiler. And so it was that sort of thing where that was the point that you're getting to during the whole novel, right? You're getting there. You're getting to the point where you need to find out what happened to this missing girl, and I knew it was coming. And you know, I had some tricks. I told that story in a flashback, so the whole story is told in second person. It's you, Jolene talking to Temple in the second person, because they have this sort of complicit relationship going on. She's always sort of in her head, and then the brakes screech to a halt, and then you've got a flashback where it explains exactly what happened to Vivian Weir. And I think that I know that remove was intentional for me, because it was hard for me. I'm a parent. I was already feeling things for Vivian, which I guess is a good sign, and I needed to tell it in a way that wasn't going to take the reader out of the story too, right? If you write something in a way that is so gory, it's going to do that. So it's a great question.
Okay, so here's another question that I'm gonna combine it with a question that I had down, because there's a question of, where do you draw inspiration for your books? Where do you get your ideas from? And I'm gonna parlay that with, what is your favorite serial killer, true crime show or podcast? I'm gonna kind of lump those together, just because I need some more podcasts to listen to. It's really all about me. Let's go ahead and start with Kim.
Okay. I love this question. So yeah, I'm a true crime fanatic, which, you know, every suspense writer ever said, right? So I'm a journalist. That's what I did before I started writing fiction. I like really spare reporting. I do love My Favorite Murder, but what I really go to for my fix is a podcast like Case File, where you've got one guy somewhere in Australia, no one knows who he is, they never tell you his name, and he just does straight reporting on crime stories. It's so great, and it gives me my fix. In terms of inspiration, I talked a little bit in the beginning about In Her Skin and how it was inspired by the story of Frederick Bourdon. It was, on its face, it's also very autobiographical. It's very much a story about me. I wasn't a con artist, but I grew up not as poor as Joe, but certainly lower middle class. I had aspirations, you know, I had to work really hard to sort of get to where I wanted to go educationally. I always thought that it would be wonderful to have the perfect family, which is very much a driving force in Joe's life. So I'm taking from true crime, but also there's a whole lot of me in that main character and really in that story. I think that answers both of your questions. So Case,
yeah, good job. Excellent job. Natalie.
I am really put on the spot here. I think I am maybe the only author I know that does not do podcasts. I don't do it. I really don't. I do a ton of audiobooks, a ton, but I really don't do the podcasting. I don't know if it's, I don't drive enough. I really don't know what it is. I feel like I'm really out of the loop on this, but I do not listen to podcasts at all. I'm sorry. I will say my inspiration comes from the fact that I don't think I'm right in the head. I really don't. Like, I really, everything that comes past me, I'm like, they might be murdering someone. You know, when you drive down the road and there's inevitably a tarp on the side of the road, you know what I'm talking about. It's like the one shoe. There's always one shoe on the side of the road. We don't know where the other shoe is. I think it's probably on a dead person's foot. And I think the tarp is always covering a dead body, always. Like inevitably, there is a body part under anything I see on the side of the road. So inspiration comes through all kinds of things. I'm in a rest stop. That's actually a scene that's in Five Total Strangers, the rest stop scene, which I've had lots of people email me about. And I'm like, yeah, that's because every time I'm in a rest stop on a freeway, I am convinced I will die. It's going to be like Vanished. Remember that old movie with Kiefer Sutherland? That's going to be happening. So I'm just always in a place where I see a dark possibility. I think that probably says something about me that a therapist would have some fun with, but it is true. That is kind of where my mind just goes naturally. So.
Oh, I avoid rest stops at all costs because I feel the same way. So it's not just you. We can go to group therapy if we need to. Emmy.
Yeah, I am not huge into true crime podcasts. I am into podcasts, and Natalie, I could understand. I was not into podcasts for a long time. And then what happens is you get into one podcast and then boom, it's like
a
you're
gateway
like,
podcast.
okay, I don't have time for this. I got to make time for this, even if it's just sitting in my car while my kids are, on an iPad or something. I like Dirty John, probably just a primer of the true crime. That's like the first. Serial was the first. Maybe Dirty John is the second one you would listen to. I also like Blackout, which is a post-apocalyptic narrative audio drama. But I got so into podcasts, I actually been making my own during Corona. I have a comedy. It is not dark. Nobody gets killed. There's no blood, but a comedy podcast that'll be coming out any day now called Workplace Comedy Podcast. It's just me being goofy with some friends. It's been a pure delight. So put that on your list, Sarah.
It's on there. And Barry.
Podcast wise, I don't have much for you. I do listen to podcasts, but they tend to be the sort of geeky and tech podcasts. And my wife and I actually had a podcast for a couple of years called Writing in Real Life, where we talked about the intersection of writing, publishing, parenthood, and marriage. We did like 108 episodes of that before we realized that we just had no time to do it anymore because of the kids. But that was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun doing that. I love the format, but I just don't listen to a lot of true crime stuff. As far as inspiration goes, I've gotten in trouble for this before, but it's just a few of us here. I whenever I get asked that question, I always wonder, where do people not get their ideas from? Like, I'm very much, when people say to me, "Oh, I want to be a writer, but I don't know what to write about," you might as well tell me you took a left turn at Mars and ended up here. It just makes no sense to me. My problem is, of the 5,000 ideas I've got right now, which one can I focus on and write about?
Yes.
Because I can't do all 5,000 of them. And eventually I'm going to die, and I'm going to die with a lot of stories untold. And which ones am I willing to leave untold when I shuffle off this mortal coil? I don't know. I don't know where they come from, because maybe I'm taking all the ones that other people should have. I don't know, but I don't know where they come from, because they're just here. And it is just, you might as well tell me that you breathe lava and drink sulfuric acid as to tell me you don't have any ideas, or you can't be inspired, because I don't. That makes no sense to me.
I was in a workshop with Marcus Takey several years ago, and he made a comment about how one of his stories evolved because he was walking home from the grocery store and there was a very dark alley, and he thought, I could die right now. And then one of his books springboarded from that, just that one thought. And Kendara.
Oh, Barry, we have opposite problems. I only have like one decent idea every 2 years, so I got to run with it. I don't have options. So,
but
that's
they're
like
really good ideas. They're really, really good.
God, I hope so, because my brain is just very, very slow. So that whole, where do we get our ideas? That's probably the most commonly asked question. Every new book, we have to answer that. And every new book, we have to come up with a compelling reply when somebody at an event inevitably puts forth the query. And with Three Dark Crowns, man, it was so easy. I could pinpoint the day, the time. I had a whole story. Ultimately, Three Dark Crowns, which is a dark fantasy about a magical island where three triplet queens are born in every generation, each with a different magical gift. And to inherit the crown of their island, they have to murder the crap out of each other when they turn 16. Whoever survives gets to be the next queen until they have their own set of triplets and the cycle repeats. So the idea from that arose from a chance encounter in 2013 with a swarm of bees and a very helpful beekeeper who told me that queen bees, when they lay their queen eggs, usually they just lay worker eggs, but when a queen bee decides to lay queen eggs, she lays about 4 or 5. The baby queens hatch out, sting the crap out of each other, and whichever one survives gets to take over the whole hive. So it's not that much of a leap to want to do that to people. And I swear that book, the concept for it, basically wrote itself over the course of my drive home. But with my next book and with every other book, God, I don't have that story. I have no idea where they come from. They just gradually creep up behind me and hit me over the back of the head. And they're like, oh, you're next, right? So I have no idea. Like, I'm all these bodies, which is my next book, and it's a murder book. It comes out in September, and I'm desperately trying to like come up with an elevator pitch or an explanation for this weird crap that it is. And I'm just very stressed out about it. So
You know, I've got a pet theory about this issue because it is, as these guys are saying, this is a question we get asked a lot. I think that once you are an author, once you sell your first book, or you feel like somehow you've earned your beret, you know, you start looking for ideas. Whereas before that, people have ideas, but they let them go. Whereas when you know you got to write a book next year, you're harvesting and you're really on the lookout for ideas. So if you are someone watching this panel and you feel like, I want to be a writer, but I never get any good ideas, just say to yourself, I'm a writer. I can't wait to find my great next idea. And then just start listening, you know, start paying attention, because I bet you it's in the alley, or it's in the, what you'll learn from your, you know, biology teacher. They are all around you. That's my inspirational message for the day.
Or it's in a beehive somewhere. I don't know. Okay, let's see, we've got a couple of other questions. Oh, this is an interesting one, and I'm pretty sure this probably came from a librarian. The question is, why do you think so many students want to read about murder and mayhem? And there's a second part to this, which that they often find that middle school students ask for books with murder, but there aren't very many on that level. And I just want to start with Barry just because of the facial expression. That's only why.
I mean, I am the guy who once pitched a picture book about a serial killer to my editor. It was going to be a shark. Never mind. Yeah, you know, kids. I mean, at least when I was a kid, 10,000 years ago, you know, when you're that age, you're beginning to explore the darkness of the world around you. I mean, some kids sadly are steeped in it already from a very young age, but in general, you're beginning to explore that. You're beginning to realize the world is a very dangerous place, and that even though you personally are indestructible, you realize that bad things can happen to people. And I think that books like this are a sort of a safe way to explore that side of the world, and to enter into it safely and without harm. As to middle schoolers, I got nothing. I'm trying, you know, when I think I'm probably the oldest person here. When I was a kid, the markets for middle grade and YA were pathetic at best. And so when I, you know, from 6th grade on, I was reading adult books because kids' books were garbage. Sorry, I mean, yeah, you had like Judy Blume, she was cool, but you know, but it was basically a lot of junk. And so, you know, yeah, I would see books, you know, with murder or whatever in them because I was reading adult books. You know, I've written middle grade. I've killed off some people in middle grade, but I usually don't do it in any sort of gruesome way. And I wouldn't describe any of those books as being about murder. The murder is incidental. It's a mystery. It's a thriller. It's whatever. I don't know what to say for middle middle schoolers who are looking for that. Maybe somebody else knows more about this than I do. Anyone? Bueller?
I
All right, okay,
was so
I'll-
into that answer that I forgot I was moderating. I apologize for that. So go on.
I would, so I will say, like, my books are more thrillers where murder is an accessory, if you will, Barry. Like, it's not the centerpiece, although it's in
It's
some
like
books
the
a little
side
more
salad.
central. Yes, isn't it? It's like earrings. It's like a really nice scarf that you put on, except bloody. So I think a lot of my books have done some crossovers. Some of my more mystery, less thriller books have been good crossovers for younger audiences. But here's what I think. Barry, I was with you. I was reading Dean Koontz and Stephen King. I was 10, maybe 11. I was like, well, I want to read dark things. So this is on the bookshelf. I'm going to grab it. I mean, I turned out okay. I kill people in my writing, but I'm pretty okay. I bake cookies. I feed my dog. My children all seem pretty okay. So I don't really see that there's too much danger or inherent scariness. I'm not a child psychologist, but I think it's pretty natural. I think a lot of people are, like Barry said, it's a time of your life where you're just starting to figure that kind of thing out. You want to look at the dark things, like you're just becoming really aware of that side of the world. That is a safe way to do it. Books let you explore it and think about it in a way that's not, hey, I'm walking down a dark alley. Let me talk to this strange man with a knife. This is a safe way to explore some of those darker things. So I think probably find a book that engages them, and it's okay if it's maybe a little dark. I've also had the experience with my kids. I know there are a lot of parents on here. My kids have read things like my son in the 4th or 5th grade. He was higher reading level and he wanted to read something a little interesting. And I was like, read Jurassic Park. I think that's good. He read it for like 2 or 3 days. And then I picked it up to read to him at night. And I was like, holy dear God, what have I done? Like, I had no idea. It's been a million years since I read it. I mean, it was a lot for 4th grade. He skimmed right past a lot of it. So I think kids self-edit, he didn't realize what was going on with a lot of those scenes. So there was some swearing that maybe was a little over the top, but whatever. He was on a school bus too. So I think it all worked out is what I'm saying. I do think kids kind of push some of that out that they're not ready for. I think that does happen. So maybe read the reader, kind of figure out, this is a sensitive reader. I need to be careful, or this kid's going to be okay with it. I think tends to handle itself a little bit.
Natalie, I think that's a really good point about how readers will self-edit what they identify with, they absorb, what they don't get, they just kind of glance over. I think that's a really good point.
Yep.
Emmy.
Yeah. I was thinking of every game that I played, like imagination game I played with my brother, my cousins, or my friends as a small child, which all began with, okay, we're orphans and blah, blah, blah. Like the first thing you do in any game, you kill your parents. They're dead. They were very nice parents, but they were dead in every game I ever played. And I think the reason why kids need to do that actually is that, and this is why I think post-apocalyptic literature and dystopian and all this stuff became really popular, and all of this dark stuff is because kids are trying to figure out what kind of world they're going to live in and how they're going to make it. So reading about murder or reading about survival is helpful because they can sort of imagine the different scenarios and imagine what they would do. So that's why I think it's out there. In terms of stuff about murders for middle schoolers, I would probably, now I'm pretty conservative this way. I'm a bit of a hippie, despite the fact that all my books are soaked in blood. So when I think about, like, parents would come up to me at book events and stuff and say, oh, can my 10-year-old read this? And I would say, no. No, they can't. They can't read it till they're 14, because not only is there a lot of violence, but there's some sexual situations. There's a weird moment with an adult and a kid. Like, please wait till they're 14 to read this book. So my instinct would be, if you have a middle schooler who's looking for a darker, more bloody book, to go to books like A Tale Dark and Grim series by Adam Gidwitz, or My Side of the Mountain, or survival stories, to sort of scratch that itch for danger. I feel like our kids are exposed to so much in the news and the media that they really don't need to be exposed to at an early age. I think it's absolutely fine for kids to live in a bubble of goodness until they're 12 and then realize all the terrible things that are out there. Ideally, in an ideal world, that's my personal philosophy. So so that would be my instinct, is to push them towards books that aren't terrifying in the same way that a book about the coronavirus might be terrifying. You're temporarily muted, Sarah.
I was unmuted and I said too soon about the coronavirus. Kendara.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I mean, I think, so much good stuff has been said. Books are safe spaces. Readers, I think it's totally natural for them to want to read about dark stuff. Books are a safe place to kind of explore that and have it feel a little dangerous and a little exciting, but totally safe, even safer than seeing like a R-rated horror movie, because yeah, you can shut your eyes, but you still have to hear it. But if a book gets too scary, you just put it down for a while or pull a friend's and throw it in the freezer. So, but I don't know why, but your stories of childhood reading are making me think back to the days in middle school where we were all passing around like the same 6 Fear Street books in our back pockets between classes. And I remember, I hadn't thought of this in years, but there was once I was reading an adult book in middle school. I was reading it during a class, not supposed to do, but there could be worse things I could be doing. And I don't know how, but there was a sex scene in it. And the kid behind me must have been reading over my shoulder, because when we got to it, he was like, whoa, and he snatched the book out of my hands. And that book made it through every single guy in the classroom during that classroom session. They were just passing it under desks. And it was this, I didn't think I was going to get it back. I thought I was going to get suspended when the teacher found out what section everybody was looking at. But yeah, I don't know. That has nothing to do with it. Your stories.
What was that book? Yeah, what was that book? Just to take a note about it.
I'm pretty sure it was Stephen King's The Stand.
Forever, maybe, depending on the year.
Kim.
So yeah, I mean, everything everybody else said. I remember that same urge to read something dark. And by darkness, I mean something that made me uncomfortable. And I like that sense of discomfort, even still. It's why I force myself to read outside of the genres that I like, because I like to experience that. I like to be reminded, I think kids like to be reminded of their own sort of flawed humanity, even if they don't understand that that's what they're doing when they're reading it. I do appreciate now that we have trigger warnings, so we do have ways for librarians to be able to act like the gatekeepers. They only had the reviews, right? They didn't have the kinds of resources that they have, specifically trigger warnings, to be able to know if something's appropriate for a certain kind of reader. But it is so tough, again, with the ages. You have 14-year-olds who are ready. In my house, I have a 14-year-old daughter who is only just now reading In Her Skin, which came out in 2018, the hardcover, because this is the moment that she decided she's ready to read it. Yeah, what do they do? They soft sell.
All right. So I'm sorry if I cut you off. I apologize.
That was it.
Okay. So we have literally like 1 or 2 minutes. I'm going to do my last question because I think we've got a student on here who would like some writing advice. But I'm going to twist that. What advice could you give to young readers? Because it tends to always be the same. So here's what I'd like to know. If you could tell your younger writer self anything, what would it be? Yeah, let's go with Kendara, sorry.
Oh, geez. My younger writer self was such a butt face. She would not have listened to any of my advice anyway, so it's kind of a lost cause. But I would say to her, it's okay, you're gonna suck for a really long time and you're gonna think it's good. And then you're gonna look back and realize it was bad, but that's fine, because you have to keep working and solving problems and doing draft after draft after draft, because that's part of the process. And the most important thing is that whatever you're writing, that you write it for you and that you love it and that it turns out the way that you want it to turn out.
All right, Kim.
Oh gosh, I would say start earlier, except I know if I had, it would have been garbage that I was writing. So I didn't start writing fiction until I turned 40. And I was a journalist before that. I would have liked to have started earlier because I have that same sense as Barry in that I feel like I'm going to die before I get to write all these stories that I have in my head. But I had to be a reporter to learn how to write in a spare way. So I think the way everything worked out is okay.
Natalie.
I would tell myself to, good God, read widely, read everything. It took me such a long time to read essays and, political nonfiction and science nonfiction and poetry. It really took me a while. I wish I'd started earlier. Because I have the same fear with the ideas, Barry. I am in the same place. I'm like, I'm going to die. I'm going to run out of time. It's going to happen. And I'm going to have all these stories I should have written, but also all these darn books I wish I'd read. Like there's so many books that I'm like, I'm going to run out of time. I'm never going to be able to read them all. So I wish I'd read more. I would say just read your pants off. Read until you can't read anymore and stop reading the same thing over and over again. Because that's tempting. It's easy to I loved horror and I read probably 40 horror books a year. When I was that age. I wish I'd thrown in some other things. I did later, but I wish I'd started that a little earlier. I think it would have served me very well.
Emmy?
I would say lighten up. It's going to be okay. Stop being so hard on yourself, because I think a big problem that I've been way too hard on myself the whole time, the whole live long life of Emmy Laybourne. But also, you can't write and criticize yourself at the same time. You can't write and edit at the same time. You have to give yourself over to the creative moment of expression and get out of your own way. So it's like driving a car with your foot on the gas and your foot on the brake at the same time. Imagine that, right? It's a mess. You go spinning all over the place and you break your engine. So I would say, take your foot off the brake and let yourself have fun doing this. And also, I'm going to add this, don't spend any money on social media campaigns because they really don't work.
So true.
All right,
That's
Barry,
a truth
bring us
bomb
up.
for you.
And now I'm imagining somewhere teen Emmy going, what the hell is social media? Oh boy, I submitted my first short story when I was like 12 years old. Don't worry, it got rejected. And that began sort of a lifelong thing where I would get eager about things. I would send things off, I'd get a rejection, and I would fall into this funk for months at a time where I wouldn't work and I wouldn't do anything. And so if I could tell my younger self any one thing, it would be, don't give up. Like not in the holistic sense of keep at it, but in the sense of stop wasting all this time being depressed that you didn't get something, that you didn't place something. You're wasting all that time. That is valuable time. And I think I probably would have gotten published much earlier if I hadn't been surrendering all this time to wallowing in my depression over not placing a short story in a science fiction magazine somewhere.
Okay, well, Emmy, Kendare, Barry, Natalie, Tim, thank you so much for being on this panel. It was a huge honor for me to get to sit here and soak in your wisdom. I'm going to throw it over to Diane, who is going to announce the winner of the school visit.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was a fantastic panel, everyone. I was totally enjoying listening to all of your wisdom and your funniness. And it's always amazing to me. It's sort of the dichotomy of life. The scary horror fiction writers are the funniest ones. And perhaps that's the way it should be. But that was a really great panel. Thank you to everyone. Now it's time to announce the winner of the school that is going to get a virtual author visit with Emmy Laybourne, and that school is West Noble Middle School in Ligonier, Indiana, which is a real small town in northern Indiana, a little north of Fort Wayne. So there's probably some snow on the ground up there. Chris DeVries, you are the person, I'm assuming a teacher, who filled out the entry form. So I will email you and do an e-introduction tomorrow with you and Emmy, and then you guys can take it from there. So congratulations. Terrific. Students at West Noble Middle School, again in Ligonier, Indiana. I love it when we can throw some things out to small town Indiana. That's fantastic. So thank you to all the schools who entered the contest. We had a long, long list, so it was wonderful to see that. And thank you again to all of our panelists. Let me quick give a shout out to my tech support team, Felina and Kristen. Thank you so very much, ladies, for being on the job tonight with me. I appreciate all of your help. And finally, thank you to our audience. It was fantastic tonight. Our next panel for this book festival is going to be on February 10th. The topic is romance and relationships. The authors, get my cheat sheet. The authors on that panel on February 10th are going to be Robin Benway, Melanie Crowder, Melissa De La Cruz, Cami Garcia, and Francesca Zappia. And our moderator is going to be the fantastic librarian, Tara Four, who's also the chair or the incoming chair of the Elliott Rosewater Indiana High School Book List. So have a good night, everyone. Thank you. And I hope you enjoyed yourself, and I'll be seeing you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. This was great.
Good night.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Nice.